Joined now by Steve House, Republican, now a candidate for House or for Congress in the 6th District. Thank you so much for joining us.
Glad to be here.
So why do you think that the 6th District is winnable by a Republican not named Mike Coffman?
The district itself, and we've done some early polling on the district, identifies itself as 50% moderate, 35% conservative, 15% liberal. So you have this group of 85% on this part of the side that I like, not because I dislike liberals, but you have this 85% group that is persuadable, in my opinion. And I think they do need to have a broader view of things than an average far-right Republican would give them, and Mike was successful for that reason.
Do you believe that he was successful in holding that seat against all the Democratic odds there because he was particularly skilled as a moderate Republican, or do you think it was just because he was the incumbent there?
I think it's partly incumbency, because incumbency always gives you an advantage. But I think the other part with Mike is Mike built a lot of relationships in the district. You know, and the district is about schools and families and communities and businesses and places of worship. And Mike really excelled at going to those places and establishing relationships. I think you see people from either party win in places you wouldn't expect all over the country, and it has a lot to do with that.
Why do you think Democratic Congressman Jason Crow should be defeated?
I think right now we're at this place in America where we're on the threshold of the greatest decade and a half of innovation in our nation's history. I think we need to lead on that, and I think to lead on that, you got to stop focusing on what happened in 2016, and you got to start thinking about what would America look like if this innovation came to play. And I think leadership is going to take us there on issues like healthcare and education, transportation, environmental sciences. There's a lot of solutions that are coming. If we don't govern well, we're not going to get there, and I think we need more leadership in that category.
What are some votes that Jason Crow has cast that you disagree with?
I haven't really looked at his record so much yet. I mean, I've watched him support Nancy and AOC and the agenda of the left, you know, pretty much straight line. I've watched the issues that they've been involved with the detention center. I just haven't seen him lead on the issues that are going to be good for the district itself. I think you get focused on Washington and you forget where you were at home. Right now, the district, with its half a dozen great cities and the complications that they're going through and opportunities they have, he needs to lead at home, and I don't think he's done that as well as he should.
What do you think that CD6 thinks of President Trump?
It's mixed. I think it's about half and half based on what I can tell. I think some people believe that the economy is great, their job situations are great. I think that you find people there who went from being on Medicaid to getting a job, to getting commercial health insurance, to seeing their children get better health care, and they like what he's done from a policy perspective, from a regulation perspective, and jobs. And I think those people are the people that are predominantly going to support him. I think anybody else out there who, if you don't like Donald Trump, you don't like Donald Trump. But if you can't argue with some of the great things that have happened.
When you hear Donald Trump talk about S-hole countries, he's talking about the home countries of some of the immigrants who live inside that district. Why would those folks vote to put an ally of President Trump in office?
I think when they hear what we're talking about from an entrepreneurship point of view, from how we make their towns, communities, and cities better, they're going to be focused on their own lives and what they're doing. What the president says or doesn't say doesn't necessarily affect exactly how they live their lives, and we're going to make that case for them on why they can have a better life, a better quality life.
Will that require you distancing yourself from the president?
I don't think it will. I think he's done some things that we can clearly leverage, because I look at the president and his policies, and I think the policies that are giving us the higher wages, the better economy, those are the things that people are going to focus on. I clearly think we've got to address immigration. I don't think there's any question the United States needs legal immigration, and that's a policy that's got to be discussed here in the next year or so.
So Congressman Crow has made gun control a chief policy priority. How do you think America can stop mass shootings?
It's a great question. I've done a lot of research on this, and I think, first of all, we got to come and have a debate. I mean, we haven't really had a good debate, right? And a debate means that you put ideas on the table from across the spectrum. I think what really scares me is when I look at what the threat assessment teams and the FBI talk about, how they don't really know how to identify a mass shooter yet. We don't have enough data to do that. Where do they come from? What makes them different one way or the other? We've got to have the debate. We've got to stop pointing fingers, sit down and talk about this in every depth we can, because it needs to change.
I want to talk about another issue Congressman Crow has talked a lot about, and that is the end of private, for-profit immigration detention facilities. What do you think of that idea?
I think you have to deal with, first, you would have to go back to the root cause. Why do people risk their lives to come to America? What is it that they're doing? It's like you or I seeking a new job, a better life. They're doing the same thing. You got to go back there and say, okay, what's causing the problem? Is there something we can do to help with that? The concept of a detention center is not something any of us want to face. But But at the same time, you have to be smart and mindful about your own laws and following, what happens when people come into this country. So we do want good legal immigration, and we do want people to come into this country. We got to figure out the root cause of why they're coming in desperate ways, and we got to solve that problem as well as figure out how to reduce the amount of people who are in detention overall.
But what about that idea of for-profit private detention centers? Is that a bad idea?
If there's mischief going on in those for-profit centers, yes, but there's also a lot of places. In fact, even the one in Aurora, I've heard people come back who've done detailed reviews of it, who went in with the wrong idea and said, it's great. They do a great job of taking care of these people. They get access to iPads, LexisNexis. They have the resources available to try to integrate themselves into American life out of that detention center. So it may be a transition center more than a detention center if you look at that. I haven't been there myself, though, so I need to go look at it.
All right. Republicans, including President Trump, they support a court challenge to Obamacare in Texas. If that succeeds, the entire Affordable Care Act would be thrown out. Do you support that idea?
You got to go back to why I think people like the Affordable Care Act. I think the numbers are in the mid 50 percentile range that like it. I've been in healthcare for 35 years. I think they like the fact that they get access to healthcare. Their perception is they get better access to healthcare. They don't like the fact that their premiums have gone up dramatically, and they don't like the fact that their deductibles are so high. So I think what you have to do is you have to take some of the core things about the Affordable Care Act, and you've got to modify them enough to solve the problem of the cost problem associated with those high deductibles and high premiums. Do you throw it out to do that, or do you modify it? I think there's about 10 or 20 things we can do to modify it that might actually get us there at the end result. Will it look like the Affordable Care Act that was passed originally in 2010? No, it may not. But at this point in time, I don't think we can convince people to get rid of it. I think we got to modify it the right way.
So the Colorado Republican Party is in the weakest point it's been in several generations now. You led that state party for several years, for a big portion of the downfall there. Why do you think you should run for office now?
Well, if you go back to my time in the party, which was 15 to 17, we had 1 of 2 U.S. senators. We had 4 of 7 congressmen. We had 3 of the 4 people at the state level. We didn't have the governor. We had everybody else. We had 68% of the county positions were Republican. I don't know that we were doing so badly. I think from 2010, where we saw the big shift, from 2010 to 2016, we had great big gains in the Republican Party. 2018, it went the other direction. That's cyclical in Colorado, so I'm not going to sit here and tell you that winning the state Senate like we did in 16 was a bad thing, electing a CU region statewide, doing some of the things we did, and holding the level of positions we did was a good thing. So I don't think we were in that bad a shape.
Where do you think the party is now, and what do you think needs to be done to fix it?
I think the party has to look at why unaffiliated voters are unaffiliating. I think the Democrats are doing the same thing, right? You have this massive group of unaffiliated voters. I think they look at party politics, party ideologies, and they get, sort of anxiety about it, and so they register unaffiliated. We got to go talk to them. We got to make sure our audience is the unaffiliated voter, not the other party's voters, because the other party's voters are going to be loyal to them, and I think the Republican Party needs to do a better job of that.
When you look at what happened to the Republicans in 18, what do you do to make you confident enough to run in 2020? I mean, how do you change that perspective?
I think that, in the past in Colorado, you can go all the way back to when Gerald Ford lost to Jimmy Carter. People said a Republican would never win statewide again after that election. It is cyclical. I think the state's fundamentally conservative. Try to pass a tax increase in this state, you're going to have a real hard time. Even a cigarette tax, as we saw a few years ago, it's very conservative fiscally. I think we've gotten a lot more moderate socially. I think we need to recognize that and go to the people and talk to them about the issues they care about, not about our party platform necessarily. They know who we are.
Steve House, thank you so much for coming in and chatting.
Thank you.
We
Wonderful.
appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
Subscribe to the Next YouTube channel for the best of Next and some other stuff.